Hello everyone, this is Chandrasekhar here. Welcome to my Kubernetes Zero to Hero session. Thank you everyone for watching my episode 4. This is episode 5. In this episode, we will talk about why deployments are needed. We'll talk about replica set versus deployments, deployment architecture, how to create a deployment using kubectl command. We'll also learn how to write YAML and what should be the content of YAML if we want to create a deployment. And we will also try to understand how to scale a deployment from lesser replicas to more replicas to lesser replicas. Also, we'll try to understand rolling updates, rollbacks, deployment histories. And if time permits, if we are not exceeding our 20 minutes time, then we will try to learn what stateful set is, why stateful set is different from deployment, how to create stateful set using YAML, what do we mean by stable pod identity, what happens when we talk about stateful set scaling, then we will try to understand difference in between deployment and stateful set, and then we will talk about when to use deployment and when to use stateful set. So let's begin. I want to begin with a very simple question. Imagine you are running one e-commerce website. Thousands of users are accessing your application. Your application is running within Kubernetes cluster. You have multiple pods, pod 1, pod 2, pod 3, pod 4. And now imagine one pod out of many, maybe pod 2 crashes. Should your website go down? No, you cannot risk that. We already solved this problem using replica sets. But now imagine something else. Every application which we use goes through certain version updates, and your developers releases a newer version of the application which is hosted at this point of time in Kubernetes cluster. For example, current version of your application is say some web server, maybe Nginx version 1, and the newer version is say Nginx version 2. How do we upgrade the application without taking the application down? What if our application is not even a web application? What if our application is a database application type? Can we manage the database application exactly like a web server application like Nginx? Again, no. This is where Kubernetes deployments and stateful sets becomes very important. Today, we are going to understand them. Today, we will create them, scale them, update them, and break them. And we will see how Kubernetes responds. And even before we do that, let's take a quick recap of what we have learned in our last session. Before learning deployment, let's quickly review. So we have learned till now that the basic Kubernetes workload is pod. A pod runs on one or more containers. We also learned the command which is needed to create the pod. Also, we learned how to list down all the pod which is created. And we have also deleted the pod. That and we also learned that a single pod do have lots of problems. If we are creating pod independently, we get into lots of problem, and that is where replica set comes in. Now, we have also learned that replica set maintains a specific number of pods all the time. For example, if we want to have always replicas, always the count of pod present is 3, it is the responsibility of a replica set. Replica set architecture also we have learned in our last session. We have also learned that the main job of replica set is to ensure actual number of pod is equals to desired number of pod. But there is a problem with replica set. Now let's understand with the problem with a replica set and how deployments resolves it. So we will start with the problem with a replica set. So problems with a replica set. So the problems with replica set is good at maintaining pods. Agreed. But what happens when we are thinking to upgrade application version? We are trying to perform rolling updates. When we are trying to roll back an application, when we are trying to maintain application versions to another one, when we are trying to manage application rollout strategies. I'll explain in few minutes what rollout strategy is. Replica set is not designed. So the problem is replica set cannot design is not designed to perform rolling updates. So it cannot perform rollout functionalities. So it can't perform rollout. It can't perform rollout functionalities. That is not why replica set is designed. And this is where another higher object in Kubernetes comes into, which we call as deployments. Let's first spend some time in clearly understanding differences in between replica set and deployments, because this is very commonly asked question in interview. So let's try to understand difference in between replica set replica set and deployment properly. Replica set and deployment properly, will try to understand the difference. So replica set main purpose is maintain a desired number of pods. So desired pod is the main function of a replica set. So the main function of replica set is maintain the desired number of pod. For example, if you want to maintain pod count of 3, then replica set makes sure that the pod always exist. But what is the main purpose of deployment? The main purpose of deployment is to manage entire life cycle of application. So what it does, it maintains life cycle. Of whose life cycle? Application life cycle is maintained by deployment, and that is the main purpose of deployment. So deployment provides multiple things. In order to maintain the life cycle, deployment offers multiple things. It offers replica management, it offers scaling of replicas, it offers rolling updates, it offers rollbacks as well, which are very essential section whenever we are dealing with any application deployment in Kubernetes cluster. Replica, scaling, rolling updates, and a rollback are four very essential section which deployment ensures that application goes through. And this is a part of our application life cycle as well. And these all things are taken care by deployments. A very simple way to remember is replica set ensures that all the three pods are running, whereas deployment manages applications and its multiple versions as well. Now let's understand this differences in between replica set and deployment in terms of architecture. So replica set, what it does, replica set directly manages pod. It manages pods like the way we have seen pod 1, pod 2, pod 3, pod 3. It directly manages all the three pods. So this replica set ensures pod is done properly. Management is done properly. But deployment does not manage pods directly. Deployment does not simply replace a replica set by managing the pods. Rather, deployment uses a replica set underneath. What deployment does, and this is very much important, deployment manages a replica set, and replica set anyways are managing multiple pods within it. Pod 1, pod 2, pod 3 is managed by a replica set only. Deployment manages a replica set, and replica set manages pods. This is the main architecture level differences in between replica set and pod. Let's understand it with some real world example. Think that a replica set is like a manager. Manager says, I always need 5 waiters. If one waiter leaves, manager hires another waiter. Like that's the function of a replica set. Deployment is more like, you can say, operations manager of the restaurant. Deployment manages number of employees, new employee rollout, replacing old employees, or reverting all the changes, and also managing different versions of the team. These are the responsibilities of deployment. Try to understand difference in between replica set and deployment very clearly. But a question comes, when should we use replica set directly and when should we use deployments directly? So let me just make one thing very clear. Another question comes, when should we use replica set? And this is again a very important point to understand. See, viewers, in most real production applications, we normally do not create replica sets directly. Instead, what we do, we follow this architecture. We create deployment. Deployment internally manages replica set. It internally creates a replica set, which we will see in few minutes while we are doing the practicals. And replica set internally anyways are managing pods. So the deployment creates and manages replica set. We do not create and manage replica set directly. Replica set is undoubtedly an important Kubernetes building block. Deployment is normally the higher level object which we use for stateless application. And mark this word, deployment is used for stateless application. So I'll make a note of this, stateless stateless application, and I'll explain you what stateless and stateful application is when we are talking about stateful set. So now let's try to understand, why do we even need deployment? Imagine our application is running. Imagine application is running and we do have running application is running, and let's think that the application is a web server which is Nginx. It is running. Now, when it is running, we have say three pods available: pod 1, pod 2, pod 3. So we have three pods available: pod 1, pod 2, and pod 3. This all the three pod is having Nginx version 1, and this is present with all the three pods. Now, what we want it to upgrade to another version which is version 2. So we want basically to upgrade it to higher version. We want pod 1 again, pod 2 again, pod 3 again, but they should host now Nginx version 2. So we want to basically upgrade from version 1 to version 2. So now what we should we do? Shall I delete all the older pods and create all the new pod? Because if I do this, certainly user may experience some downtime. Instead, what Kubernetes does, Kubernetes performs some strategy. Kubernetes offers some strategy. What it does quite in this way. Old pod is replaced by new pod one at a time. Old pod 1 is replaced by new pod 1. Old pod 2 is replaced by new pod 2. Old pod 3 is replaced by new pod 3. One at a time it happens, and this method is called rolling updates. This method is called a rolling update. Rolling update does not allow all the pod to go down or get deleted at once. Rather, it tries to take one pod down at a time and ensures that high availability, ensures that my application is up all the time. So if I have to draw one simple architecture of deployment, what deployment does, and especially deployment with version updates, deployment is maintaining a replica set. This replica set is having older version of pod, and now when we want to perform certain updates, what happens? This deployment will have newer version of replica set, and this newer version of replica set will have newer version of pods. This newer version will have newer version of pods, and we will see this also in few minutes. So same deployment, you see deployment is not changing, deployment remains same. Previous version of deployment was having older version of replica set which contained older version of pod, and newer version of replica, and after upgrades it comes newer version of replica set with newer version of pods. This is what the strategy of deployment is. So just to summarize you, we have understood the differences in between replica set and deployments. We understood the main function of a replica set, which is it is going to ensure that desired pod is always present, whereas the main function of deployment is to ensure life cycle of any application is managed properly. When I say life cycle, it includes replica, scaling, rolling updates, and rollbacks. Again, we learned the architecture level differences in between replica set and deployment. And then we learned when should we use replica set, and what we learned there in production environment, we never manage replica set. We never create replica set directly. Rather, we create deployments, and deployments underneath creates replica sets, and replica set is for sure will be managing pods. We also understood the architecture of deployment only, wherein in case if you are going through upgrades, then the deployment will have older version of replica set which will have older version of pods, and as we upgrade it will have newer version of replica set with newer version of pod. So this is what the differences in between replica set and deployment. In my next session, I will talk about the practicals of deployments. I'll execute some commands by using which I'll be able to create some deployments. Because in case if I extend, it will go beyond the time limit which we set for each session. Thank you everyone for watching this session. Certainly wait for my next episode, which will be next session of this, which will be a follow up of this, wherein I'll be executing some commands practically. It was very much important for me to give you a complete idea about the differences in between replica set and deployment, because this is very commonly asked question in interview. If you did not subscribe my channel, please subscribe it and share my videos to everyone who can get benefited with this. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll very soon release my next episode which contains all the practicals about deployments.